So now that we have a bit of a better understanding of what it is that we're talking about when we talk about stress, I suppose we're going to look at ways we can manage stress with type 1 diabetes. So I suppose just like I mentioned about, first having to understand something before we can manage it, it's important as part of that that we are able to recognize it in the first place. So be your own stress detective is the first thing. So your body's reactions to stress, so those kind of physical kind of body behaviors, mind, emotions, those reactions that your body might be displaying, I suppose are its attempts to communicate with you, that something's going on. So being able to tune in and to notice your own personal response to stress is so important as part of your ability to be able to manage it. To try to work out, what might be triggering the stress response. Are there kind of some external sources of stress, kind of whether that be a situation based or body based? Or are there some internal sources of stress kind of going on for you right now? Try talking it out with someone else. Sometimes a big part of stress management is just firstly making sense of what's actually going on. So try talking it out with somebody or even writing it down if talking it out doesn't feel so comfortable for you. Find your own strategies to be able to help you, first of all, just make sense of what it is that's actually going on. The second strategy then we talk about is getting the foundations right. And I often think about ourselves, almost like buildings. And I suppose stress being sometimes like the weather. And sometimes the weather is great, and sometimes the weather is not. No matter what, we can't really control it though. So what we have to do, I suppose, is to try and kind of build our capacity to be able to deal with the weather no matter what it throws at us. And a big part of that is getting the foundations right. And this really comes back to kind of those common sense, kind of basic principles that are around kind of sleep, diet, exercise, and those kind of fundamentals that we all need, not just those of us with type 1 diabetes, but all of us need to look after both our physical and our mental health at the moment. So really, again, just to focus on enhancing our capacity to be able to deal with stress in whatever form it comes in. Just to focus in on exercise and physical activity in particular, I suppose we know that exercise has been shown to really support both our physical and our mental health through kind of helping to release kind of built up tension that might be there, but also kind of release kind of certain endorphins that can really boost our mood and even do things that contribute to better quality sleep, which again can have a great knock on effect of how we might be feeling the next day. So these basics go a long way, I suppose, in supporting our diabetes self-management as well. We're going to look now, I suppose, at two strategies for targeting the stress response. Um, so the stress response, what we would have mentioned before, I suppose, is looking at kind of, and sometimes it can occur kind of internally, I suppose, it's about how we think about a situation. So sometimes what we might want to do is, when we identified the source of stress, try taking a step back and looking at it again. So often we might be exacerbating the kind of feelings of stress by, I suppose, by the thoughts and the feelings that we're having about it. So we might be kind of catastrophizing a little bit. Are we thinking about the worst case scenario here? Is this kind of a lot of self talk, a lot of negative self talk that's coming in here rather than the situation itself being the stress trigger? Again, just reminding ourselves that our thoughts, I suppose, sometimes we kind of have this kind of, I suppose, negative bias in our thoughts and our thinking patterns. I suppose our minds have evolved to try and protect us and try and look after us, but sometimes it kind of gets it wrong. It's kind of overly helpful or trying to be overly helpful sometimes. I need to be able to kind of recognize when our minds might be doing this by kind of putting a bit of space between ourselves and our thoughts. We don't have to suppose believe everything that our minds say, and we don't have to pay attention to everything that our minds say as well. So our thoughts, I try and think of them as stories, not as facts. And I suppose there's lots of strategies that we can use to help us to put space between our thoughts and ourselves. Some of them might be mindfulness based, and that may or may not be kind of, I suppose, what some people enjoy or like to do. But I suppose in my kind of sense of it, it can come in lots of different ways. I can include some resources here in terms of formal mindfulness practice or just kind of more kind of informal mindfulness practice that some of us might be able to access a little bit more easily as well. So I include some resources for this, or you might have your own resources around apps and things like that that you use. Headspace, I know, is a great one that can help, I suppose, with some kind of mindfulness practice as well. The second is a strategy that targets the stress response. So we think about the stress response around kind of our breathing kind of, I suppose, pattern and how that changes in the stress response. So our breathing rate is often quickened in the stress response. So one of the kind of, I suppose, easiest and best ways to target that is by helping ourselves to kind of regulate our breathing pattern again. So again, just kind of by recognizing that by kind of regulating our breathing to a slower, deeper, and more regular pattern, we kind of increase the oxygen supply into our bloodstream, which just has that natural ability to relax the body and to calm the stress response that might be triggered. There's lots of different breathing strategies out there. I've just introduced one example here, and that's the 3 breath prompt. And essentially, what we're trying to do is just bring your focus, bring your attention to your breathing. Acknowledge that there's lots of things going on, there's probably lots of chat going on in our mind at this time when we're feeling a stress response. And what we want to do is bring our conscious awareness and attention to our breathing. So that kind of inhalation of air in through our nose, and I suppose the sensations that come with that, of our chest kind of, I suppose, expanding, our shoulders rising as we breathe air in. And again, noticing actually what happens when we breathe that air out to our mouth again. So again, we just want to get into a habit, into a daily practice of this. And this is just a repetition of 3 that we can do, slow and controlled kind of breathing patterns again. It's great if we can get into a habit of this, that we're not just relying on using this when the stress response maybe is triggered, but that it becomes something that is kind of routine and becomes habitual to us, so we can access it whenever we need as well. Now, diabetes related stress, I just wanted to kind of spend a few moments just kind of emphasizing a few aspects of this here. And the first one I want to do is just to acknowledge and to give ourselves permission to kind of name the fact that diabetes and living with diabetes can be stressful sometimes. And these feelings are normal, they're valid, and they're shared by many others living with it too. So it's really, really important as part of our stress management is to first of all allow ourselves to be able to feel stress, that it's normal. We don't need to push it away. It is part of living with diabetes, and it's important to kind of suppose make a bit of space for that by giving ourselves permission to feel. The second kind of point I wanted to raise here is the importance of controlling the controllables, if that makes sense. So I suppose there's times in our lives where we have days where we haven't changed a single thing, we've done everything the exact same, and our blood sugars for whatever reason have just decided to go AWOL. It's so frustrating those days. I don't know about you, but they really crack me up. But that's because there's so many things, and I have to remind myself as well, there's so many things that can affect our diabetes which are not always in our control. So yes, we have great technology nowadays, and we've got lots of tools, and we've got carb counting, we've got CDMs, we've got pumps, we've got lots of different ways to enhance how well our diabetes is managed. But that doesn't mean that this condition is 100% within our direct control. There's certain things that can happen outside of our control that can have an impact as well. So I think it's helpful to remind ourselves that just focus on what you can control. You can do certain things, you can monitor your sugars, you can take your insulin, you can estimate your carbs, you can get the basics kind of right in terms of kind of your sleep and your exercise. But outside of that, there's lots of things you can't control, so try and just focus in on what you can. And the last point here, and this one is really, really important as well, is just to watch out for that inner critic. So this goes, even for myself, from the young people I've been working with, is that we do have a tendency to kind of use our high sugar readings or our A1C results as kind of a stick to beat ourselves up with. But these are just numbers. They're not a grade and a test. They're not a reflection of who you are as a person. I suppose it's trying to let go of those unhelpful thoughts that kind of kick in. Again, it's probably our overly helpful mind trying to help us out here, or trying to motivate us. And when it comes in with that kind of critical voice, when it sees a high sugar reading, but that drains quite a lot of energy from us, and it really does motivate us in the long term at all. In fact, it kind of absorbs quite a lot of energy from us, which we need to actually get back on track a little bit. So try not to focus our thoughts on that, and try actually get our energy back on helpful things that we can do for ourselves right now. Those things are within our control, and just watching out for that inner critic voice, which naturally we all have, but we can take a step back and put a bit of space in ourselves in that voice. And lastly then, it's just look to remember that there are some additional support options that are available. And these might take different forms for different people. For some of us, it might be more about people in our lives who we can rely on for different types of support that we might need, whether that be, just to listen, or sometimes we actually do want some advice or some practical kind of guidance on something, or sometimes it might be more from an emotional support place, or just to give us some hugs. We might need different people for different functions. For diabetes specific support, I suppose don't forget about your diabetes team, even during this time of COVID-19 where clinic face-to-face appointments are suspended. I know a lot of the diabetes teams are offering phone support clinics, and there is quite a lot of things happening online with diabetes support as well, as webinars being hosted by various professional groups. So check out those platforms as well. There are peer support options, so Diabetes Ireland, for example, and a website called Trivabetes by Grania Flynn has great kind of references to different support options that are available through the peer support networks here in Ireland. And there might be other support options that you might want to consider too. And sometimes sources of stress, like I mentioned, may not be diabetes specific. There might be things that are going on, or it might be a combination of a few different things. And sometimes it might be helpful to think about support options in the form of therapeutic support, if that might be something that you think you could benefit from. There's organisations here in Ireland such as Jigsaw, or there's school or there's counselling support services in colleges, which might be, I suppose, a benefit for you to consider right now. Websites such as yourmentalhealth.ie or even jigsawonline.ie has information on kind of where you can access support and how you might be able to do that as well. So don't be afraid to check those out too. And again, just to conclude this little workshop, I suppose stress, like anything, is we can't control the stress, we can't stop it from happening, but we can look at how we respond to it. And I hope this workshop has given you a few kind of, I suppose, things to think about in terms of how you might be responding to stress and how you might be able to support yourself to be able to respond in a way that helps you out. Okay, thanks for checking in.